So in the previous video, we showed you how to get a basic Plumber server set up running basic HTTP and running a Plumber service. What we want to do in this video is show you how to set up SSL or TLS or HTTPS access. These all mean the same thing for our purposes. How to set up access that's going to be secure so that when I go to visit my website, rather than using this unsecured IP address, we'll actually be able to use something that has an SSL certificate associated with it, which is going to make the communication encrypted between my browser and the service. This is good if you're doing anything security sensitive, of course, but this is also going to be required for some external integrations. For instance, if you want to integrate with Amazon Web Services' different Alexa service, then this is something that you'll actually have to do. They require that you have an SSL certificate associated with your server. So thankfully, we have some of this is done for us in the Plumber package. So we have this do configure HTTPS function, which will actually go out to the Plumber instance that we provisioned, and it will set up HTTPS access on that server for us. The problem is that in order to get an SSL certificate, you actually have to have a domain name associated with your server. So this, what we get for free automatically is this IP address. That is not going to be sufficient for us to get an SSL certificate. So this is unfortunate if you don't already have a domain name, because you're going to have to go out of your way to set one up. I like the registrar name.com. I think they're pretty easy to use. And you could actually have some of the top level domain names are actually pretty cheap. So if you wanted to do Jeff's Plumber site.xyz, I'm just picking one here, but I'm guessing that's probably available and is probably not terribly expensive. So this is $11 a year. Looks like I can get a .co for even cheaper. So hopefully you can find a domain name that's not terribly expensive. Here's one for $2.99. So you should be able to find one that's not terribly expensive, and so this shouldn't be a huge expense for you, but it is a bit of a hassle. You have to go create an account and kind of do some work here to set up your domain. But once you actually have a domain, you can go into the tab to edit DNS records, and the DNS records look something like this. And so you can see that I've got some records configured here. But what we're going to do for the sake of setting up an SSL certificate on our server is I'm going to take the IP address that's currently associated with my server, and bear in mind that if you shut down your server and restart it, it will not have the same IP address. If I go to destroy the service or the server and start a new one, it's not going to have the same IP address. So make sure that you have the server that you actually are going to be using long term, and I believe there are actually ways to bind a particular server to a particular IP address if you care, but you can look that up in DigitalOcean. So what we're going to do today is we're going to add an A record, which is just a different type of DNS record, and I'm going to say my Plumber sample. You can't really see that for whatever reason, but so my Plumber sample.trust.tl is going to point to this IP address, and that lifetime is fine. So I'm going to go ahead and add the record. And now you can see this is my Plumber sample.trust.tl points to this IP address. So be aware that if you're just registering your domain name, it can take some time to go through. Likewise, if you're changing an existing record, if I were to change, for instance, if I were to edit this record that already existed and point it somewhere else, then that would also take minutes or even hours to propagate throughout the internet. So because I'm setting up a new record, we're going to find that it's pretty immediate that it takes effect. But just be patient if this is a new domain or you're editing an existing entry to alter the IP address. That may take some time for your computer to see. All right, and so now that we have our DNS records set up, we can actually go in and use this function here that exists in Plumber, do configure HTTPS. First of all, it's going to ask for a reference to your droplet. You can actually save that from the previous command that we ran, the do provision. If you didn't save it, then you can run the analog C droplets command, and that'll list out all the droplets that you have in your environment, and you can find the one that you're interested in. But in my case, I've actually got a reference to it, so I'm going to say drop. The domain is this. I'm going to say my email is fake email at trestletalk.com. And one other parameter that you need to accept here is the terms of service. This is saying that you accept the terms of service for the Let's Encrypt organization, which is the group that we're gonna use to get a free SSL certificate. And so if you accept their terms of service, then you can set that to true, and that is all we need to do. So now I'm going to go ahead and run this, and hopefully what we'll see is, first of all, it's going to do a quick check to make sure that my domain actually points to the IP that I say it does, and it finds that it's working. This is the part that could take a while if you don't already, if you are setting up a new domain. You may find that takes a little bit. So this is going to go out and actually set up the necessary bits that we need for to run the Let's Encrypt software, which is again the software that we're going to use to get an SSL certificate. And thankfully, they are an organization that's willing to grant them to us for free. So we don't have to pay anything for the cert, which is a new phenomenon. Historically, organizations have charged money for these. But what we're actually able to do here is to go in and set up the certificate that we want. It's checking with Let's Encrypt to make sure that everything works, and you should see this message here that says, congratulations, your cert has been installed. So now what that means is that on our server, we now have an SSL certificate that's not associated with the IP address, but rather with a domain. And so I need to reference my server at myplumbersample.trust.tl. If you go to this IP address, the HTTPS certificate isn't going to work. It's going to forward you to your domain. But what you see here is that you've got this green padlock now. So this is a secure website. You're running on HTTPS, and your domain is now SSL secured. And again, we're still accessing Plumber. It's the same Plumber service that we had before. And if you try to access your site on HTTP, it's going to forward you to HTTPS, which is what you want. That's a secure practice. So now you have a Plumber server that's been secured by SSL, and you actually have a domain name associated with it as well. So that will allow you to either point your users here or set up external integrations using your HTTPS domain.